Hey guys, it's October and we are still continuing the Halloween month reviews. We've already covered Sleepy Hollow and Cabin in the Woods, and we are now covering a werewolf movie. And this one is a fan favorite for a lot of people, and that werewolf movie is An American Werewolf in London, directed by John Landis and stars David Naughton as David Kessler, who goes on a trip with his best friend Jack, played by Griffin Dunn, as two college students who are taking a trip around England, but unfortunately both of them get attacked by an unseen monster where Jack gets killed by it, but David gets bitten by it, where he soon finds out that he is slowly becoming a werewolf. This movie has been praised for years for some of the best practical effects, makeup, and animatronics for a werewolf film, and some would even say that this is one of, if not the best werewolf movie of all time. And I am a werewolf fan myself, and I have been one ever since Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban, where that film has a character that transforms into a werewolf. And of course, as I got older, I watched other werewolf films that are very popular, movies like Ginger Snaps, Dog Soldiers, The Howling, Werewolf by Night, Werewolf of London, and of course, The Wolfman with Lon Chaney Jr. And this movie would often be on par with some of those werewolf films as one of the best ones. As for me, I don't necessarily agree. Now, I do like this film. I do think it's a good watch, and I do recommend watching it. But it does have some issues relating to the story, a couple of its characters, and some of the humor. But I'm not going to get to those just yet. I'm just going to talk about the stuff that I liked first. So let's get the obvious out of the way. The practical effects, the makeup, and the animatronics are all phenomenal. They still hold up, even by today's standards. In particular, the famous transformation scene where you see David transform into a werewolf for the first time, where you would see his whole body change and you see like his hands just stretch out and you see fur growing out of his body. And for both the sound effects and for David screaming in pain, it makes his transformation sound painful. Rick Baker and his team did a fantastic job with the transformation for the werewolf and for the design itself. And when you see the design for the werewolf, it still looks terrifying. In fact, it looks more terrifying than some of the werewolf films that we get in today's time, which is kinda sad when you think about it. And what makes this werewolf look convincing is that it's not really in the movie that much, and you don't really get a clear shot of the werewolf design, because for the most part you would just get like brief and quick shots of the werewolf's eyes and his teeth, and you only get the point of view of the werewolf when it's going to attack someone. And sometimes when you see the werewolf, it's only from a far away shot where you just see the werewolf from a distance, or in the very end when you see it running around London and you only see its head and its torso. You never get a wide shot of the full design of the werewolf, and I think that is a good thing, because if you try to show it too much, it starts to look noticeably fake and you wouldn't believe it's a werewolf anymore. Similar to Jaws, where that movie didn't show the shark a whole lot, mostly because of the trouble that they had making the film with the animatronic shark, but they still made the film terrifying when you didn't see the shark a whole lot, where they had to work with what they had and what they had to use to make it feel like a shark is actually attacking someone. And when you do see the shark, it looks very convincing and terrifying, and that's exactly what they did with the werewolf in this film. And even the makeup on Jack's ghost is really good, but unfortunately I can't show it here because that is part of YouTube's policies where I can't show any blood and violence. But when you see Jack as a ghost and you see how terrible he looks from the werewolf that killed him, you can see that it looks real. Like, you get a look at his neck and see how gross and messed up it is. And both that makeup, the werewolf design, and the transformation earned Rick Baker an Oscar for best makeup, and it is definitely deserved. And one of the things in this film that I think did pretty well is the psychological side, where you see David is seeing all these visions and he's all of a sudden seeing Jack's ghost right in front of him. He thinks he might be going crazy, and you would understand why, because he would have visions of himself running in a forest, or when he has nightmares of werewolves dressed as soldiers killing him and his family. But we all know that what Jack is saying to David is unfortunately true, and things might go bad for David if he doesn't do something about it. And we see evidence of that when people are trying to give him food, but he's not eating any of the food because he says he's not hungry. And that's probably because he's not hungry for regular food. He's hungry for human meat. I think David Naughton did a pretty good job as David, as a normal guy that just so happens to have a werewolf inside him, but he thinks it's make-believe. And there are times where his performance can go a little off and on, but there will be times where his performance is great, like of course in the famous transformation scene where when he sees himself transforming and he's seeing his hand stretch out, he looks terrified. And now for this small town that both David and Jack run into in the beginning of the film, where they see a bunch of people living there and they go inside this pub called the Slaughtered Lamb, where they all of a sudden feel like that they're not welcome by these people. They're not serving them drinks or food, and all of a sudden they are seeing a star that's up on the wall. And when one of them asks what the star is for, everyone just goes silent and wants the two of them to just leave instead of just explaining it. And then later in the film, the doctor who's been taking care of David goes to this small town and into the Slaughtered Lamb to investigate what's been going on. And unfortunately, he doesn't get any answers for it, and us, the audience, don't get any answers from that either, because they're trying to keep the werewolf stuff a secret from the world, even though they know that David got bit and they let him go so that he can kill people when the full moon is out. And we don't really learn much about these people or this village other than they would look at David and Jack and say, "Beware the moon, stick to the road, steer clear of the moors." And that's it. And I thought that American Werewolf in Paris, since that's a sequel to that, was going to explain it more, but it doesn't. So now those questions are left unanswered, which could be fine for a lot of people, and for this film, I am fine with it. So those questions are still left unanswered, and I am fine with them being unanswered for this film, but I wouldn't mind if they made another werewolf film that would explore more of that story, because it would create more world building for this village and getting us to understand more of why this village isn't the greatest. Now, unfortunately, that's where my positives end and leading me to my issues. Now, again, I do think this is a good movie. I do think it's worth watching, but it does have some issues. Like, for one, the romance between David and Alex, who is a nurse that's been nursing him back to health until she takes him back to her flat where she decides to sleep with him. And that's it. No development for their relationship blossoming. We don't get to see them learn more as people. They're really just a couple because they wanted to sleep together, which really makes their romance pretty underwhelming, because they have some emotional moments later in the film that you're supposed to buy, but you don't really buy them because their relationship is underdeveloped. And that one is kind of disappointing because it's kind of a big part in the film, so that when you see the two of them have emotional moments when the werewolf stuff is happening, you don't really buy it. Another issue I have with this film, and it's kind of a big one, is most of the humor. Now, there are times where I thought the humor was pretty funny, like with David's visions and dream sequences, and with other scenes when he's talking to Jack in spirit form, but there'll be times where the humor can feel out of place and ruin the tone. Like, there'll be one scene where Jack and David are all of a sudden talking to each other in an adult film, and it's supposed to be an emotional scene that they're talking about what David should do while an adult film is playing right in front of them. Or in another scene where a police officer accidentally knocks down the doctor's equipment behind him. "A naked American man stole my balloons." What? Now, that part of the humor does ruin the tone for me, and it happens a lot, unfortunately. And the reason that this is considered a horror comedy is that this film is directed by John Landis, who comes from a comedy background, with movies like The Blues Brothers or Trading Places or Coming to America, and also directed the Michael Jackson music video Thriller, which, by the way, Rick Baker also did the makeup and practical effects for that music video. But Landis's humor does at times mess up the tone, where we'll have some emotional and serious moments that are supposed to get you invested in the characters, and then it's just ruined with a humorous moment or joke, which can get some audience members very confused about what's going on, making them think, is this supposed to be a comedy or a serious horror movie? Now, does the humor ruin the entire film? Absolutely not. In fact, the humor does kind of help make this movie feel like it's a completely different type of werewolf film. Now, does it make me forgive the humor for being flat? Not quite, but it does help make this film feel different compared to other werewolf movies. And what also makes me forgive it is that it still has great practical effects, great makeup, an interesting story, and a great performance from its main lead. If you love werewolf films, I do recommend watching this film, as well as some of the other werewolf films I've already mentioned. And it's a movie I do recommend watching overall if you want to watch a fun werewolf film for Halloween. I do think this is an enjoyable one. I enjoy it from time to time for Halloween. It's not one of my favorite werewolf films compared to Ginger Snaps or The Wolfman, but it is a good one. And just that transformation scene alone is worth watching for the film. I'm gonna give American Werewolf in London a B+. So guys, if you have seen American Werewolf in London, what do you think about it? Do you think it's one of the best werewolf films, or do you think that this is one of the worst werewolf films? And if you do think it's one of the worst, then okay, I can accept it, but you gotta admit, that werewolf transformation scene was pretty awesome. Let me know in the comments below. And as always, if you like this video, then please leave a like and subscribe to my channel so you don't miss a thing, because it helps my channel grow. Hit the notification bell so you know what other videos I'm posting. Follow me on Facebook and Instagram. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you in the next one.